What's up? How y'all doing? It's Jared, and this is a Benchmade 417 Fact. It's an interesting name that they were coming out with. I freaking love this knife. This knife is touted as like the ultimate EDC knife, right? Because I don't actually own a Benchmade 940. You're probably familiar with the Benchmade 940, the 943. I really like the 943, and its blade is actually more reminiscent to this. It's more of a clip point design. This is still kind of a sweeping dagger design, but I do like that knife, but the knife is just too small. It's just too thin. This has actually got some girth to it. This 417 here, it's almost around about a half an inch thick. It's got a lot of girth to it, and it's still a very thin, very nice slicey spine. And so really where this thing excels at is going to excel is dirty work. This is a tactical knife, and it's in their black class, and that is, I think that's a proper placement. But because it is so light, because it's so thin, because it is in that same class of knife, you know, kind of, this is a 531 Pardue here, very light, very thin, very easy to carry. It doesn't take up a whole lot of pocket real estate. And that kind of gets thrown into the EDC category, right? And obviously this thing will function for that. You know what I mean? It definitely is a EDC capable knife. It's with all of those attributes, especially since you got the S30V. It is sharp out of the box. It's not very thin behind the edge, but it is sharp. You know what I mean? It's going to perform. But this thing is a little folding spike. To me, this is a just stabby. That is what this thing is designed for, and it really excels at that. The blade that really comes into my head, this is a Tylite 6 from Cold Steel. This is an old one. It's an AUS 8. They're crazily upgraded now, but that's really just kind of what this is. This is a thrust-centric blade design, and the handle lends itself to that, you know, because it doesn't seem like there's going to be a whole lot of actual stoppage protection, actually, you know, sliding up onto this blade. But the scales themselves, the aluminum scales, having as rough of a ridging as it is, and actually these holes as well come into play, and actually just the grip of this knife, as well as the little bit of protection. You do have a little bit of a ramp there to actually stop you from sliding up onto this knife. And with as thin and as narrow and, you know, as thin of a blade stock, just as pointy as this knife is, it's going to go into material very well. You know, it's going to cut, it's going to do whatever, you know, whatever you have to do to get yourself out of the situation that this thing is really designed to get you out of. I freaking love this thing. You can see me carrying it in my boot. I do carry this generally as a secondary knife because it is just in that tactical realm for me. This is a weapon as far as I'm concerned. This is something like this SOCP dagger right here, right? This is SOCP from Benchmade, and that's really what this thing screams to me as. So if I want to carry a knife to actually cut stuff, if I want to carry, you know, something to, you know, to be a tool, I generally wind up carrying more than one knife. I'll carry this thing in my boot. I'll carry, you know, and I'll carry something else, something a little bit more slicey with a little bit more belly in my pocket, you know, so that I just have multiple options, because I just freaking love this thing. But I can't justify carrying it as an EDC knife because it is so light and it is so small and it's freaking tiny. Most tactical knives in this kind of category, here's another Benchmade for you. This is a, what is this, 583 Barrage. I mean, just the thickness of the blade. You can see how much more breadth this blade has here. And again, I'll bring up another Cold Steel. This is another straight up tactical knife. Shout out to Cedric and Ada Outdoors. Probably the most badass knife channel on YouTube right now. You can see how much breadth this thing has. You know what I mean? It's a very wide blade. And that runs synonymous, again, with most knives. Most dedicated tactical folders you see have a much larger, much beefier, heavier blade, right? This thing doesn't. It's still very sleek and it's very slim, and I do think that they did that. The designers did that so that it could be put into that EDC, so it could be put into that category, but at the same time, it's just a excellent little folding spike. This thing is a serious little weapon, and I respect the hell out of it. I love that stonewash too, because you can still see a lot of people hate this. A lot of people really don't like the milling marks. You can see right there that are still underneath that stonewash, but it's got a really heavy stonewash on top of those milling marks, and I just love the aesthetics that actually gives this blade. I did just clean it, so there's still a little bit of crap, you know, sticks, you know, little bit of gunk kicking on there, and the handles are skeletonized. You can see, obviously, it goes all the way through. You can see all the way through this handle, which is an interesting aesthetic choice. I mean, the fact that they decided to mill these liners out and then actually mill out the scales as well is just really cool. But the biggest factor that comes into play for me is actually in deployment. You can see when I grab the pocket clip, you know what I mean? You grab the pocket clip of basically every knife, every folding knife. I mean, it's kind of the same thing. This is a Benchmade Griptilian. You grab the pocket clip, slide the knife open like that. I mean, that's the vast majority of pocket knives, and this one is no different. I'm still grabbing onto that pocket clip, and just with the pocket clip, that is enough tension for me to to deploy that blade. The action comes into play on that, but I just really love being able to dig my fingers in there, because I can't get my finger in there deep enough to actually touch that blade. I just can't do it. I can jam it in there and I can try it, and it just really doesn't work, right? So I can stick my finger in there and just have a solid grip on this knife when I actually deploy that blade. Readjust my grip to get a proper cutting grip, proper thrusting grip, whatever I need to do. But I mean, it is not coming out of my hand on the actual deployment. And that's one thing that's that's really good as far as in the actual tactical realm. Some of the negatives of this thing, it is very light, and it does have a relatively thin blade stock. I believe it's 0.1 inches thick, and so it's very narrow, and with as little breadth as it does have, with as narrow with his blade as it is, with as pointy of a tip as it is, it's not an extremely strong blade design. This is not a beater. This is not a knife, The 940 is so popular as an EDC knife because it's got that, the reverse Tonto, which is very thick, very beefy, robust tip. Again, I'm sorry I don't have an example and I keep calling reference to it, but this knife here does not have that attribute. This tip, you dig that into a screw, if you try to use this thing like a Phillips head screwdriver, it's just gonna snap right off, especially with the S30V, because that is a little bit harder of a steel. You don't have as much ductility as if it was something like a simple carbon steel. And so it is a knife designed for thrusting. That's really what it just excels at in my mind, because it's not gonna be a beater. It's not gonna be a very hard use knife. It's gonna work well as an EDC knife, cutting open packages and letters and apples and things like that, because it is definitely long enough for that as well, which, I mean, an almost 4-inch blade is very good for EDC. But at the same time, hold on, I gotta take care of this dog. Yeah, sorry about that. It's Halloween, she's barking at trick-or-treaters. They haven't even come to my door yet. What the crap is up with this? But this is, it's definitely going to function in all of those roles, but it's really good. The actual best thing about this entire knife to me is the suggestion that this Omega spring gives. Because I got a picture on Instagram. Oh, hold on. I'll actually pull this scale off. Right? Because if you're familiar with the design of the axis lock, right? It's called an axis lock. Well, it's called an Omega spring. Excuse me. I don't know why it's called an axis lock. But this is called an Omega spring because it's actually shaped like that little Omega symbol right there. And some of the problems that people have had is actually this spring breaking off. And it usually breaks off right up here at where this actual connection, or that little bend right there that goes down into the actual scale itself. And so this is what gives you your tension on the actual axis spring. That's how your actual axis bar works. You can see that spring flexing up and down there, but it's a singular spring, right? That's not the case with this 417. They've actually given it a little bit of an extra coil, and I don't know whether or not this was done because of how narrow this is, how little of a space they actually had in this design, and they wanted to keep a good spring tension, to keep that length of the spring, and so it's easier to disengage, and so it wouldn't be so hard to disengage, and so that's why they've coiled it like this. Or this is because they're giving it more length and they want to take the tension off of the actual stress points in the spring, divvying up the stress through the actual spring itself, which I think is an excellent idea. So if this carries through to some of their other designs, this Omega spring here is, I believe, I'm not honestly sure, but just theory but I believe it's going to be much superior to something like this. But you can see the distance, right? They had to shorten this spring, and it honestly makes me wonder whether or not that's why they did it, or whatever, how they actually did it. But you can see here, it still does operate just the same way as the original axis lock, but I think that's a definitely cool thing. I like that about this knife. Took me a long time to get this review up. I saw this knife when it was first announced at the SHOT Show, and I got so excited for it, but it took me a while to get a non-first production run version because I wanted to beat it up. I really wanted to kind of just carry, and I feel bad beating up first production run knives, and so I really wanted to get the non-first production run. It took me a little bit of time, and then I freaking love this thing, but it's taken me a little bit of a while to get a real good feel for it, because honestly, all I want to do, my real thought is I just want to throw this thing like this, like a little dart. That's just what I want to do. I haven't done it. I'm not going to because I'm not stupid, but it's so light and it's just like a freaking pencil. And that's actually one comparison. Hold on. Yeah, that's one comparison that Benchmade actually made in the introduction video for this knife here, was up against their pen. This is a 1100-16 tactical pen, it's their titanium model tactical pen. And I mean, it's not exactly a valid comparison because it's a shitload bigger than this pen, but I mean, it is very decent. It is small. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to say that this knife is large, but here it is up against that actual pen, give you a little bit of a better view of it. And look at what I did to this pen. I did a little bit of anodizing, or I took the anodizing off of it. You can see the original pen was this blue color here that's still down in those little grooves. And I left this cap originally that blue color, but it just looked kind of off. I really like the way that it looks now. I think that it kind of gives it a cool effect. I left a little bit of blue in those, and down in these ones as well. I messed it up. So I do really need to re-anodize this thing. I'm probably going to have some fun with that at some point. But that's really all I got to say about this one. This is a Benchmade 417 fact. Again, this is an excellent knife. Benchmade knocking it out of the park. I don't know where they're freaking getting their names from. Freak, haha, yeah, Benchmade Freak came out at the same time as this one, and they're all freaking excellent, except this one is so much better. Now I'm just rambling. Y'all have a good one.